I must be insane because this is one of the trickiest topics I have ever considered covering to date. How to fit almost any size tire on the FJ Cruiser. Hey there everyone, welcome to FJX 2000 Productions and another episode of Let's FJ. As I just mentioned, in today's video, I will be sharing with you all the essentials you need to know to get aftermarket tire or wheel sizes to fit on your Toyota FJ Cruiser. I'm currently on my second FJ Cruiser, and over the years I have run 285 75 R16s, 305 70 R16s, 315 70 R17s, and at this moment I'm running 255 85 R17s. So quite the range of tire sizes. I want to share what I've learned from my personal experiences as well as from years of researching this topic in order to help you out the best I can, since people ask the question, will this size of tire fit on my FJ? All the time. And that's why I made this video. Be sure to use this video's timeline chapters or timestamps in the description for navigation, as this will be a longer video, but watch the whole thing to get all the details, since some things are discussed in more detail for certain tire sizes and then only referred back to later on. Before we dive in, I want to thank all my returning subscribers for your support and hope you continue to enjoy the FJ Cruiser related content. If you're not yet subscribed, please consider doing so in order to join the FJX 2000 community and click the bell icon to be notified when new FJ Cruiser videos are released. If you enjoy the video or it is helpful to you, please leave a like, since my goal for this video is to reach 5,000 likes, making it the most liked video on the channel. And it also lets me know how I'm doing overall. Comment below and let me know what your tire and wheel setup is, or if you have a new tire size you want to run after watching the video. Anyways, let's get started. The biggest worry for folks who want to change to a different tire size, install aftermarket tires, or do a combination of both is whether or not the new tire and wheel setup will work. Or in other words, will the altered setup cause the tire to make contact and rub in areas of the wheel wells, ultimately causing damage to the tires themselves, the FJ's body or frame components, or in a worst case scenario, driveline components. What I will go over today will help most folks get an understanding for what will and won't work in general, but keep in mind that each setup will be slightly different and unique, so there could be some trial and error involved. I highly recommend doing research via the FJ Cruiser forums, FJ Cruiser Facebook groups, and other resources for what specific wheel and tire combos have worked for other people, and then use that as a basis to make your own changes. I will link one particularly helpful thread from the forums down below that you can check out, but we will be covering that same stuff in this video. One of the basics to know about tire sizes before moving on is that you have the standard system of measurement and the metric system of measurement. An example of a standard measurement would be a 35 by 1250 R17 tire, which indicates a 35-inch diameter tire that is 12.5 inches wide on a 17-inch wheel, which is pretty straightforward. Meanwhile, the metric measurements are a little more complex, so let's use the example of a 285 70 R17 tire size. The 285 is a measurement in millimeters and indicates a tire width of 285 millimeters, and the 17 is again a measurement of the wheel being in inches, 17 inches. The 70 is actually referring to the ratio of the tire sidewall in comparison to the tire's width. So one sidewall of the 285 70 R17 tire is 70% of the tire's 285 millimeter width, which comes out to basically be 200 millimeters or 7.9 inches. Now if you double this number so you are taking into account both sidewalls and add the diameter of the wheel, you get the full diameter of 32.8 inches, or essentially a 33-inch tire. So being able to tell just from looking at the metric tire measurement what a tire's diameter and width are in inches isn't as easy, but there are lots of tire size calculators online that can convert it for you, and with enough time and research, you get used to seeing the sizes and can guesstimate what the dimensions would be. The other thing to know before we look at specific tire sizes and their fitment are wheel dimensions and measurements. It's important to understand how changing the wheels and their various measurements can affect how the tire will fit in the wheel well. The easiest measurement to understand with wheels is their diameter and width. For example, the factory FJ Cruiser 17-inch wheels measure 17 by 7.5 inches, meaning they are 17 inches in diameter and have a 7.5-inch width. And this is true for both the OEM alloy wheels and steel wheels shown here. When it came to 16-inch FJ Cruiser wheels, they were all 16 by 7.5 inches, so 1 inch smaller in diameter than the previous wheels, but the same width. All the various 16-inch wheels that came on the FJs can be seen here. The more difficult measurements of wheels to understand are backspacing and offset. These measurements are essentially two ways of measuring the same thing, with backspacing being a measurement, usually in inches, from the rear lip of the wheel to the rear mounting surface of the wheel. Meanwhile, offset is measured in millimeters and measures the actual offset of the wheel's mounting surface in comparison to the center line of the wheel. So if the mounting surface were directly lined up with the wheel center line, this wheel would have 0 millimeters of offset. But if you move the mounting surface outwards, then you have a positive measurement. The OEM FJ Cruiser wheels are actually like this, having a plus 15 millimeter offset and a backspacing measurement of 4.84 inches. Conversely, if the mounting surface was moved more inwards, this actually will give you a negative wheel offset and a smaller backspacing measurement. So those are the basics of wheel and tire measurements, and as we begin talking about the various tire sizes and how to make them fit, this will come in handy. It is also worth noting that the FJ Cruiser's wheel bolt pattern is 6 by 5.5 inches, or 139.7 millimeters, depending on your measurement system. And the minimum wheel size you can fit on the FJ and still clear the brake calipers is a 16-inch wheel, which is also pretty important to know. Some vehicles in the off-road world can fit smaller 15-inch wheels, and generally the smaller a wheel is compared to the tire, the better it is considered for off-roading. But the minimum for FJs, again, is a 16-inch wheel, which is why the more off-road themed FJ packages always came with 16-inch wheels. And because I mostly orient my channel towards FJs and their use as off-road vehicles, I will stick with referring to the 16 and 17-inch wheels versus 18-inch, 20-inch, or any other size of wheel that isn't as advantageous for airing down and doing more technical off-roading. But you can still apply the principles of measurements and fitment presented in this video if you are looking at installing tires and wheels like that. Now let's look at the factory FJ Cruiser tire size as our baseline for tire sizes. For most FJ Cruisers, the factory tire is a 265/70R17 when the FJ is equipped with the OEM 17-inch wheels, or 265/75R16 if the FJ has OEM 16-inch wheels, or TRD 16-inch wheels. FJs from the factory were equipped with pretty tame tires unless the FJ had a special edition package, off-road package, TRD package, or other similar package. With those packages, the FJ had BF Goodrich KO all-terrain tires, which were much better suited for off-roading and rugged terrain. With both these tire sizes being the intended factory size, they could be run on and off-road with no issues. The 265/70R17 tire size measures out to be 31.6 inches in diameter and 10.7 inches in width, in theory. I say in theory because between tire manufacturers, or even between tire models, there are slight variations in tire sizing. So be sure to check out manufacturers' websites as they usually state what their tire's true dimensions are. Either way, with our baseline tire size being slightly smaller than 32 inches, let's look at the next tire size up that people sometimes run. And for now, assume all these tire sizes are being mounted on the OEM wheels. We will talk about aftermarket wheels later. The 275/70R17 tire size is an ever so slight increase in both dimensions of the tire. The new tire measures out to be 32.2 inches, a true 32-inch tire, and the width is 10.7 inches. So essentially, you can install this tire size on the factory wheels and not have to worry about rubbing at all, which is great. With the change in size being so slight, visually there isn't a huge difference, but you don't have to worry about the negatives of increasing tire sizes, like power loss or speedometer inaccuracy, so there is a case to be made for these tires, though I think most are more inclined to go for the next tire size. The FJ Cruiser's classic upgraded tire size is the 33-inch tire. For many, this tire is the standard when it comes to off-roading, since it is known for being relatively easy to fit without any rubbing issues. I have had this tire size on both of my FJ Cruisers, and my first FJ even had them installed without any sort of lift, which is something some folks can get away with. When it comes to 33-inch tires, however, there are different widths to consider and slight variations in diameter. by far the most common 33-inch tire used on FJ Cruisers is the 285/70 R17 or 285/75 R16 size, depending on if you have 17-inch or 16-inch wheels. This tire size is essentially 33 inches in diameter with an 11.5-inch tread width, so about an inch and a half taller than the factory tires and about an inch wider too. I highly recommend this tire to anyone who wants a reliable, upgraded tire size with practically no issues at all. Since it is the most tried and true option out there, you will hear me use this tire as the primary size to compare other sizes against, since it is pretty much the standard. Now, even though I did say some stock FJs can get this size to fit without rubbing, that is mostly for FJs that aren't used for off-roading, and even then, there is no guarantee. Every FJ is different due to their alignment. For off-roading purposes with this tire, you will definitely want to install something around a 3-inch lift, as that will help ensure that you don't experience hard rubbing while driving off-road, and you may even need to perform a body mount chop, or BMC, as this is the most common place people typically experience tire rub first. What is a body mount chop, you ask? Basically, one of the locations the FJ's body mounts to the frame is at the rear of the front wheel well, right behind this front mud flap. And the part of the frame where this mount is found actually extends quite a bit further than it needs to, making it prone to coming in contact with the tires while turning sharply and/or having the tire flexing upwards. Therefore, a very common modification involves cutting the excess metal of the body mount and re-welding a plate of steel over this spot to ensure structural integrity of the frame, but also allow for more clearance. Just be aware, once we get into the 33-inch plus territory, this modification becomes more necessary. But one thing some folks do to help avoid doing the body mount chop is having their FJ's front alignment adjusted in such a way that the caster is as far forward as possible, or in other words, around plus 4 degrees of caster. So perhaps that should be the first step when avoiding rubbing before you bust out the angle grinder and welder. Another popular 33-inch tire is the 255/80 R17 size, or its 16-inch wheel equivalent, the 255/85 R16. This is commonly what people refer to as a pizza cutter, as this tire is taller than the factory size tire, but narrower than it too, measuring in at only 10 inches wide, which some people argue is better for certain kinds of off-roading or poor weather conditions, like snow. There are also sizes that are 33s, but rather than being narrower, they are wider, like the 305/70 R16 size, 305/65 R17 size, or if you look at the standard tire measurements, the 33 by 1250 R17 size, which are all around 12 to 12.5 inches in width, giving the FJ a sizable footprint. I ran 305/70 R16s on my first FJ and loved it, but I currently have pizza cutters that I have quite enjoyed as well. So there are pros and cons to both, I would say, so it is all about personal preference. Again, keep in mind that as the tires begin getting larger in diameter and wider, there begins to be a higher probability of experiencing rubbing, making the body mount chop and other modifications necessary, especially once you start getting tires that are 12 inches or wider. When speaking about the factory wheels, for example, remember how they are 7.5 inches wide? Well, when you have a tire that is 12.5 inches wide on these wheels, this means the tires are bulging out around 2.5 inches on either side, which means contact right here at the upper control arm is much more likely. Because of this, you have several options. First, you could run aftermarket lower profile upper control arms so the tires clear this location, but even if there is clearance for the tires when driving straight, when you turn the tires, they may still contact the front of the control arm. As an additional or alternative measure for this, many FJ Cruiser owners add 1.25" or 1.5" wheel spacers, with Spider Track's 1.25" inch wheel spacers sort of being the standard for our community. I even have run these exact wheel spacers on both of my FJs and have had no problems at all. Wheel spacers essentially add whatever their width is to the existing back spacing of your wheels, and 1.25" is usually enough to make clearing the UCA a breeze. But once you push your wheels out that extra 1.25" to 1.5", the chances of rubbing at the body mount are pretty much inevitable, making the body mount chop absolutely necessary. So the other thing you could do at this point is run an aftermarket wheel. Sticking with the example of a 12.5-inch wide tire on a 17-inch wheel, if you do your calculations correctly, you could not only run a wider wheel, like an 8 or 9-inch wide wheel, which would cause the tire to bulge less, which is safer and healthier for the tire, but you could also decrease your wheel's offset compared to the factory, and find a position for the tire to sit that clears the upper control arm, but doesn't make the tire stick out as far as adding wheel spacers would, meaning you can get away with a less aggressive body mount chop and just have less wheel rubbing issues in general. Getting back to tires though, there are a lot of specific 33-inch tire sizes I won't get to mention, but one size that has become especially popular is the 295/70R17 size, slightly wider and slightly taller than the more common 285/70R17, but basically with the same quality of fitment. My cousin actually runs this tire size on his FJ, and it has been great for him. No rubbing and no body mount chop. He has them mounted on the factory 17-inch wheels and has a dependable 3-inch lift. And with a proper alignment as well, he has really enjoyed the problem-free nature of 33s. From here we start moving into the range of 34-inch tires, like the 285/75R17 size, which is basically the same width as the 285/70R17 size, yet a whole inch taller, which some folks really like the look and performance of. With this diameter of tire, at full turn, the likelihood of rubbing on the body mount is much higher, so a BMC is something you'll probably need, and a 3-inch lift minimum is pretty much a necessity for tires that are 33 inches or larger. In the realm of 34s, you also have to remember that you aren't only mounting these tires on your axles, but also on your spare tire mount. And this becomes an issue if you have the factory rear bumper. Some people find that these tires don't quite clear the OEM bumper, so there are a few options, and this also applies to tires larger than this. You can flip the spare tire mount, which allows the tire to clear the bumper, but also looks like a saggy backpack to me. You can add a wheel spacer to the spare, which sometimes works, or they even sell spare tire relocation brackets that raise and extend the tire's mounting position. Or you can simply get an aftermarket rear bumper with more clearance, or even a rear swing-out bumper that allows for the tire to be mounted on the swing-out arm. This is actually preferred as the rear cargo door of the FJ really isn't designed for accommodating the weight of a large aftermarket tire, as it puts lots of strain on the cargo door hinges and piston. Do note that some larger tires on the spare make the ability to open the rear window fully impossible. Once we get into the range of 34-inch tires or larger, folks really start to notice how the FJ seems to not have as much pep in its step as it did with the stock setup. Or in other words, the loss of power from the FJ having to turn larger, heavier wheels and tires is more noticeable. The speedometer also starts to become noticeably off from what the FJ's true speed is. Some folks at this point may even start considering re-gearing their FJs or getting their speedometer recalibrated, but I will talk more about that with 35s. And when it comes to 34s, the tires I currently run are 255/85R17s, which the manufacturer claims are 35s, but their true measurement, once installed, comes out to be exactly 34 inches, which has been a great size for me as far as 34-inch pizza cutters go. So just keep in mind that 34-inch tires do exist, but most folks in the FJ community seem to only look at either 33s or 35s. So let's move on to 35s. In the world of FJs, the 35-inch tire in the past few years has seemingly become the new 33 in some ways, since so many more people are running this size tire. If you watch my Types of FJ Builds video, I talk about how 33s are typically found on many styles of FJ builds, except for the rock crawler build, but 35s today are being used more and more on many different FJs, so knowing how to fit them is important. With these larger diameter tires, you get a little more clearance when off-roading, not only for clearing underbelly components, but also for improving the FJ's approach, breakover, and descent angles. The most common size when it comes to 35s is the 315/70R17 size for 17-inch wheels, or 315/75R16 for 16-inch wheels, and the equivalent standard measurement tire size would be the 35/1250R17, which actually may measure ever so slightly larger in diameter than the 315s. Again, with this size, a BMC becomes absolutely necessary, and other areas you need to keep in mind that could also apply to fitting are the wheel wells just above the BMC, the front sway bar and frame in that area, the rear and top of the rear wheel wells, and the upper control arms as previously talked about. Lots of hammering of the body sheet metal may be necessary to avoid heavy rubbing issues, and another common modification to avoid tire rubbing or damage is hammering the pinch weld that sits above the body mount. By flattening this and just hammering back this whole area in general, you gain a bit of extra clearance, which is useful. But for a lot of owners, they simply do the main modifications to avoid rubbing, like the BMC and hammering the pinch weld flat, and then if they happen to rub when they are actually off-roading, they just address it at a later date, since they then know exactly where the FJ will be rubbing at. As far as lifts go, in the early days of the FJ, many thought the only way you could run 35s was with a 6-inch lift, since they are typically advertised as being designed with 35s in mind. But experience has taught us that with the proper modifications, as we have mentioned, you can fit 35s on a 3-inch lift. And this setup is actually preferred for off-roading purposes, as it lowers your center of gravity and can allow more flex and articulation. But another thing some owners can do if they want to help avoid rubbing in their wheel wells is installing a body lift kit that usually comes in a 1/2-inch version or 1-inch version. I personally have a 1/2-inch body lift on my FJ, and it helps with avoiding rubbing at the rear and top of the front wheel wells, which is exactly what I intended. But at this point, if you have a lot of questions about FJ Cruiser lifts, just know that I do have a 3-part lift series that you can check out for more details after this. Remember that with installations like a new front lift and suspension components, an alignment is probably necessary, and with 35s, you definitely want to adjust that caster as far forward as possible to help clear the body mount. One rule of thumb when it comes to fitting tires that I've read about is keeping the tire as close to the upper control arm as possible without rubbing, as this helps ensure that it isn't too far outwards where you could then have lots of difficulties clearing the body mount. This may take some research of other people's setups to see what works for them, especially if they have aftermarket wheels. Once you reach the 35-inch threshold, many will highly recommend re-gearing the front and rear axles of the FJ Cruiser to better handle the increased tire size. The factory gear ratio on FJs is 3.73, which is just the ratio of the driven gear divided by the driver gear, or in other words, the number of teeth on the ring gear divided by the pinion gear. In the FJ world, the typical ratio that is recommended for 2007 to 2009 models with the smaller 8-inch rear differential are 456 gears, and for 2010 and up FJs with the 8.2-inch rear differential, it is 456 or 488 gears. These new gear ratios help restore the feeling of power that is lost with running larger tires, and the aftermarket gears are generally stronger, making breaking teeth less likely, which is definitely wanted while off-roading. Now what about tires that are larger than 35s? I won't go into depth about these tire sizes as they are a bit more uncommon, but I have seen a few more folks in recent years running 37-inch tires. Some people are even saying 37s are the new 35, which may be true. From what I've seen, the folks that get 37s or larger to fit have pretty extreme setups where lots of custom work has been done, such as 6-inch lifts with additional modifications, or even long travel setups with tons of trimming and even more advanced fabrication work. And even then, at this point, you just have to accept that rubbing happens, and you just deal with it unless it is causing major issues. But for the most serious off-roaders, it is at this point with 37s or larger tires that they may start considering more advanced modifications or setups, such as a solid axle swap or the Marlin Crawler RC-LT HD kit. That kit actually moves the front tire forward and makes installing 35s without doing a body mount chop a possibility. And they have even shown that the kit can run 40-inch tires on their custom Tacoma. But once you get into this territory, just know that there is a whole lot of work that must be done when compared to a bolt-on lift, such as re-gearing, aftermarket transfer cases, and I'm sure other fabrication work. A solid axle swap requires completely custom work as there is no kit for it. But as I mentioned in my Styles of FJ Builds video, these types of lift setups can be designed with whatever tire size the owner has in mind, from 37s to even 42s or more. But with that, we have now covered all the major tire sizes you typically see on FJ Cruisers and how to make many tire and wheel combos fit. However, I do have a couple more notes on wheels and tires that could apply to you. Note that while I said 16-inch wheels are the minimum wheel size for FJs, not every 16-inch wheel out there fits, specifically if the offset is too extreme. But this can also apply to larger diameters or widths of wheels. So again, do some research ahead of time and see if someone else has run a wheel with your same wheel's dimensions just in case. And 16-inch wheel fitment may become a little more tricky if you have an aftermarket big brake kit installed, such as the TRD big brake kit. But even the 16-inch TRD wheels fit with that installed, so don't be too worried. Speaking of small wheels, I have seen at least one FJ owner fit 15-inch wheels on their FJ Cruiser because the offset on the wheels was super negative and they had such large wheel spacers that it made the wheel completely clear the brakes, which are typically the limiting factor. Yet this setup really isn't practical in a lot of ways, and especially when it comes to turning, so I don't recommend it at all. In recent years, not only for tire clearance but also for looks, many people have been removing the plastic OEM fender flares, so that is a possibility to keep in mind if you're rubbing on those. And for those who do the body mount chop, many end up removing the front OEM mud flaps and never reinstall them since they don't want the plastic to be getting hit by the tire. But for those who do want to keep them on, look into installing Rad Rubber Designs FJ fender flaps, specifically designed to cover up the body mount chop area in a clean, almost factory looking way, while giving the tire clearance it otherwise may not have had. And speaking of body mount chops, there are companies that produce body mount relocation kits, where the whole body mount arm is cut off and replaced with a new one that is mounted in such a way that making tire contact with it is practically impossible. So it is pretty much the best choice out there for those who really want to never worry about hitting the body mount again. Though I talked about normal wheels, for the extreme off-roader, there is such a thing as beadlock wheels, which are basically a wheel designed to clamp onto the edge of the tire, making breaking the bead while off-roading unlikely. This allows the user to air down to very low pressures, even in the single PSI digits, but typically these wheels are a bit of a hassle to install and balance, so they really aren't recommended for your daily drivers, more for off-road specific FJs. And like how we mentioned that wheel spacers or wheels with decreased back spacing or negative offset would move the tires more outward, front long travel kits for the FJ do the same thing. Total Chaos, for example, has the plus 2-inch and plus 3.5-inch long travel kits available, with the plus 2-inch kit increasing the track width on each side by 2 inches, and likewise the plus 3.5-inch kit making the track width 3.5 inches wider on each side. These kits are great for certain Baja, rally, or crawler setups, but that width would surely cause issues with rubbing that would need to be addressed, especially at the body mount and top of the wheel wells. But again, I mentioned these lifts in the second part of my lift series of videos, so check it out if you have more questions. And when it comes to upper control arms, many people upgrade their UCAs when getting their vehicle lifted, and lots of aftermarket designs take into account that the vehicle will be lifted, yet still aren't adjustable. That is, except for the SPC light racing upper control arms. These actually have both camber and caster alignment adjustability, which could be a great help when trying to get your alignment to clear the body mount and avoid rubbing. I figured I would mention them as many people really like them, and I even ran them on my first FJ. And with that, I think we have talked enough about FJ Cruiser wheels and tires for one day. Go back and rewatch sections of the specific tire sizes you're interested in, and maybe even previous sections to ensure you don't miss any details when it comes to getting your desired wheel and tire setup to fit. Check out resources like fjcruiserforums.com for more detailed questions, and comment below what your setup is or any other thoughts relating to this video's topic that you have. I really hope you enjoyed the video and that it can be a useful resource for those looking into tire and wheel upgrades. Again, please let me know how I'm doing by liking the video and helping me reach my 5,000 like goal. Share this video with other FJ Cruiser owners you know or meet who might find the information useful. And until next time, take care.